So now I'd like to introduce Arlene Anderson. Welcome, Arlene. I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. And good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the country. As she said, I am in Ecuador, but hopefully I think things will work out just fine here. So got away from the election just to find a different election. Goodness. So we're going to talk about resilience today and bouncing back. And wherever you are in that bounce, whether you haven't bounced yet and you're just at the beginning, or whether you've had some disturbances and setbacks and you're at the bottom of this picture, or if you're on the other side of it, you will find some important information today and some things to think about and things to do about your situation. And I want to congratulate you for being here, because leaders are the people that can separate the urgent from the important. And sometimes resiliency is an urgent thing, but it is always an important thing. So today should give you some ideas on how to make your network strong and to keep it strong regardless of things that are happening in your environment. As Cassie said, I've been working in hospitals and clinics and home care and long-term care, and what this doesn't tell you is that I also have personal experience with resilience and coming back from traumas and personal things. It's not just me, it's all of us have done that, and we're not blank slates. And I will be asking you some questions as we go along and getting your input as well on a couple of key issues. So be ready for that. We'll be having some answers in the chat box as we go along. I like to provide the information on where I got some of the concepts that I'll be presenting, just to let you know that it's research-based. And even though there are no magic bullets, there are some things that we can learn and start to practice that make our network stronger. So this is a reference just for you. So where are we going today in the hour that we have? I like to separate it into what, and those are the first two bullets. We're going to define resilience. What good is it? What are the common stages? And then we'll get to so what, which is applying those ideas to the networks that we have and how to develop them. And finally, the now what. So what can I do tomorrow to make my network stronger and more resilient? What can I do next week? What can I be thinking about in the years to come? So we can use the outline of what, so what, and now what. And probably the first half will be the what and so what, and the last part I really want to make sure that we have good time to cover the strategies for building resilience for your networks. And we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. Well, this slide says begin where you are. And the wonderful thing about that is there is no other place you can begin. So it does help us to recognize, though, where we are in the process and be looking for that as we go through these ideas. There is no bad place to be. It's just wherever it is that you are, that's where you have to start. And the other aspect I want to cover here is that nothing grows in a straight line. You can see that there's a tangled mess. If this resembles your world and your network, then you are probably not alone. It is just the way things grow. But the good news is things can grow in this way. So let's look at the definition of resilience. What are we talking about? And I've given a couple of definitions just because one might resonate better with you than others. So the first one is from Walker and Salt. And they define it as the capacity to absorb disturbance and still maintain basic function and structure. So things happen, but you're still able to keep going. Another optional definition here is the capacity to function with a core purpose, meaning, and forward momentum to be able to keep going in the face of trauma. So there's a thread here that goes along that something happens and you're able to get back to your functioning or to keep functioning. A shorthand way of saying this is the ability to bounce back. That's an elegant way. It's not complete, but it does give you an idea. It's easily something that can stick in your head. And the question I'm going to ask you in a few minutes as we go along is, why do some networks and people bounce back and others don't? Certainly you can think of in your own experience organizations or groups or individuals that are really great. They just keep going, they find a way, and there are other people who get stuck, and there they are, and they never seem to get past whatever happens. So I'm going to ask you for your ideas on what makes the difference. So think about that for the next few minutes. Now, resilience can be more than just about people, and I just want to touch on the fact that there are 4 origins of resilience theories. One is looking at individuals and groups when they face traumas and disturbances. Another is ecological. So if you think about natural systems like a forest, when a forest has a fire, how does it come back to full life again? And how does it regenerate? Another area is disaster relief. So recoveries after disasters, and those things have been studied. So both the human aspect and the natural aspect. First of all, is recovery possible? And then at what speed? So another example might be floods. So we're going to be able to come back from that, but what do we need to do to be able to make that faster? And the 4th origin of resilience is engineering. And I like this one because it is designed resilience or proactive resilience in my mind, because you think about what does this, if you're building a bridge, for example, what environment does this bridge have to endure? Are there hurricanes there? Are there earthquakes? What are the kinds of things that are potential disturbances, and can you build it right into the design itself that it's going to be able to withstand those disturbances? So all of those are good metaphors as we think about our networks and how we can design and be proactive about the strength of our networks. So if you are resilient, what kinds of things are the traits of resilience? So do you see anything here that is desirable in your network? Creativity, insight, perspective. Those are some of the things that resilience will give you. And biological aspects as well, being able to handle the types of stress that comes along. And of course the context, the relationships, and the network that we've created. Now the measure of success is not whether or not you have a tough problem to deal with, but whether it's the same problem you had last year. Ponder that for a second. You have the same problems that you had last year. Resilience is not going to prevent trouble. You're going to have it. And I always like to have new problems, not the same ones. So resilience can help you to have new problems. I don't know if that's good news or bad news for you, but it will help you to get to the next stage, and you will encounter a new set of challenges, but you'll be ready for them. So what does resilience do for us? A couple of quick things here. First of all, we'll be able to respond more quickly and in the right way. We've all experienced something that, okay, it was a small thing, but somebody blows up. Or it seems like a really big thing, but somebody doesn't react in a way that's commensurate with the challenge. So resilience helps you to define, okay, this is the kind of challenge it is. I'll have just the right amount of response to it, just to be able to solve it. And having resilience gives you reserves, so that when something happens, it doesn't throw you. You know, the wind blows, but you're still able to stand. You're still able to, bend and be flexible as you need to, but you've got a lot of reserves. You're not at the end of your rope. And the third thing is that it keeps your options open. And as networks, you like to be able to have plan A, plan B, plan C, lots of different ways you can get something done. So resilience helps you to have some more options and reserves and the ability to respond. Now, I told you I might be asking this question, and you're not blank slates, you have experience, so I'm going to invite you to put into the chat box some of your thoughts about why some people and systems have resilience and others don't. Any ideas on why some people and systems are able to recover from challenges and others don't seem to be able to do that? And there probably is not a wrong answer here. You've all experienced them. Yes, personal experiences. Right. And that could go both ways, where somebody's had so many bad experiences, they just give up. Or they've had so many personal experiences, they gain strength from it. Positive mindset approach, absolutely. Any other thoughts? Perceiving possible threats, right? And sometimes you don't see the threat, or you ignore the threat, or you are in denial about the threat until it overcomes you. But if you're able to perceive it in that way, it can give you resilience. Or if you see threats that aren't there, you're going to use up your energy in a way that you don't need to. So, good factors. Some others have mentioned role models. Depending on the people around you, how are they reacting to things? Your beliefs about the world and how it works. I'm going to add just one more, because our genes, our physical makeup, actually does, according to research by Dr. Brian Sexton from the Duke Patient Safety Center, he says about 30% of our ability to be resilient has to do with our genes. That's individuals. So it certainly is a factor. Let's go on and see what more we can learn about it. The benefits of resilience, just very quickly here, is that resilient people and systems are flexible. And when there are new circumstances, it doesn't take them so long to be able to understand, oh, this is how it is, I'm going to make an adjustment. They expect to bounce back and feel confident that they will. And you talked about a positive mindset and approach. Absolutely, that's one of the benefits. And resilient people are adept at seeing things from someone else's point of view. And if we are able to do that, we don't feel so alone, and we're able to recover faster. So all of those things are some of the benefits of resilience. And as I said before, it's not just a reactive thing, but if you're planning ahead, which you are now, even just attending this webinar, resilience refers to our capacity to deal with the discomfort and adversity, but also it's something that enriches our lives. So not our own only, but the lives of our networks as well. So it just becomes a much more rich experience. Okay, very quickly, let's review what was resilience. The ability to bounce back is the shorthand version of it. The ability to withstand trauma and disturbances and still maintain function. But here's a key point. The bounce back may or may not bring you back to the same place. So the best way to show you this is to just take a look at these two bowls on your screen. I'm going to try to get my arrow. There it is. There it is. Okay, so look at the my arrow won't come to me. Okay, take a look at that bowl on the left. And if you think about a ball dropping into it, I'm going to use my cursor. I'm not sure this is going to work. But if you think about that bowl on the left and a ball being dropped into it, where's it going to go? It's going to go easily sit at the bottom. And if you pull that ball up, to any of the sides, it's going to quickly try to find its way back to the bottom. And the ability to maintain constancy in the face of changing conditions is a healthy thing. So you can think of the bottom of the bowl there as homeostasis. And homeo means same, and stasis means lack of motion. So just a couple of quick examples of that in that left bowl. If you think about the bowl, the little ball at the bottom, it's the same as our bodies maintaining core temperature. Outside of us, we could have 2 degrees or 4 minus 4 degrees below zero. That's what I think is in Minnesota right now. And Alabama, I think you probably have something much nicer. So even though the outside temperatures are very, very different. Our bodies maintain the temperature within limits that we can manage. So if we get hot, we sweat. We get cold, we shiver. So we try to stay in our homeostasis. Or if you think about a thermostat in a household furnace, it's connected to a thermometer so that when the temperature in the house drops to the level that you've selected, that same switch will turn on the furnace. When the furnace brings more and more heat in the house, it rises until it reaches that level and then shuts off. So either way, it's trying to maintain a homeostasis. So resistance to change in this way, to be able to stay in one place, is universal. And many of us are really good at blocking out things that threaten us, or we don't pay attention to them until we have no other choice but to pay attention to what's taking place. So thinking about that ball that's at the bottom of the left bowl, if you pull it up to the side, sometimes things are so chaotic it ends up on the top of the rim. And that's where we find ourselves thinking, well, we might really need to change. And it might be where it's just an idea of ours that changes. It might be small things during the day. Like you thought this person was an expert in one area, and then because of all these behaviors and all these things that you see, you realize, oh, they're much more competent than you thought. And you're going to have to change that opinion, and you're going to end up with a new homeostasis, which should maybe be in that right bowl there. I'm going to change my whole idea about how this works. So the point with these two bowls is just that existing homeostasis has to break down if you're going to set the stage for what to come. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if things seem chaotic and up for change and disturbed. That's exactly how you get to a new homeostasis. Okay, so looking at the law of disruption and reintegration, and probably for some of you working in the healthcare industry today, or over the last 30 years, like I have done, you certainly feel like an expert in disruption and reintegration, because we have a lot of that happening. So let's just take a look at it here. What happens is we're in our homeostasis there on the red, it's this bifurcation point or stress. Something happens, and we might think of it as a new idea. Maybe you get a new role. Maybe there are new rules that your network has to abide by, new circumstances, or maybe even just new members that, can be a really good thing, but it's still disruptive. So the homeostasis gets disturbed and you've got a disruption. And because of that disruption, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, however you define it, it can lead to some chaos because things aren't the way that they were. And from that chaos, you've got two choices then. You can fall into dysfunction. So you know what? I don't even know what to do. Throw up your hands, or it just gets wildly out of control, or to bounce back to resilience. And part of that resilience is to reintegrate. Okay, we have new ideas, we have new members, we have a new way of configuring ourselves. And if it's done in a good way, a positive way, you might end up with a new homeostatic structure. So things will get to a new normal, is probably how you heard that described sometimes. Okay. I really like this statement that a hard fall leads to a high bounce if you are made of the right material. So those are not necessarily bad things when things fall apart or undergo something that looks like chaos. This is the good news of today, so pay attention. Make sure you're getting this point that if things seem like they are sometimes falling apart, you might be in a very necessary stage if you're going to get to a stronger position. So what? We're going to get to some of the so what's here. So the implication is, in order to learn and experience meaningful change, we have to fall apart. And if we don't do that, if we maintain ourselves and don't adapt when we need to, then we don't have the strength we need when other difficult challenges and disruptions enter our lives or into our network's lives. By making us more knowledgeable and adaptive each period of disruption helps us prepare for whatever stress lies ahead. If you can think about some things that you've been through, that once you've been through them the first time, it really helps you the second time. You're a little more prepared. It doesn't throw you. And I like to think about parents with their first child and how everything is a crisis. It's like, oh no, there's a temperature, or we don't know how to manage this, and there isn't a good manual on how to be a parent to every baby. So you have to make some of it up and be flexible and learn it. And then I like to watch those same parents with their second child or their third child. Things don't throw them. Oh yeah, we've seen this before. We're able to manage this. So you've certainly seen this in your personal lives and friends' lives. It's the same for an organization and for a network. When you've faced some things before, then you have that history and you say, okay, we made it through that. If we can do that, we can do this one. Remember the strength that we suddenly found. So those are the parts of the so what. And the world is round. The place that may seem like the end may also be the beginning. So there are necessary stages to these things. Let's take a quick look back at the definition, just to review and remind ourselves. The capacity to absorb disturbance and still keep going. The capacity to function with a core purpose and meaning, forward momentum in the face of trauma, and the shorthand version, the ability to bounce back, even if it might be a new place, higher place, hopefully. And the important thing is this, to be able to, at any moment, sacrifice what we are for what we would become. You know, when we get our networks together, we kind of have to define what our mission is, and we know who the members are. It just kind of feels like, oh, I can just take a breath. What a wonderful thing. And we get it all moving very, very well. That's the question that faces you at that point. Do we just let it just go smoothly, or is there something more that we could become? We have to sacrifice sometimes what we have for what we could be in order to grow. And very quickly, I want to talk about the adaptive cycle. And these, as you think about your own network, consider which phase you might be in, and or which phases you may have gone through to this point. The first one is the growth phase. And this is where you start finding a lot of resources and you come together. It's when you started forming as a network and you figured out where was your funding, who were the members, what was your mission, what was your vision for what you could become. Those were exciting days. A lot of things, decisions being made. And then comes the conservation phase. And you start to become efficient. You know who to call for what. You know how the processes are going to go. Those are all in place. And it really starts to hum along nicely. Most networks and individuals and organizations, they spend a lot of time in the conservation phase, in the growth phase and conservation. Those are the fun times because we're putting things together, we're nailing them down, we're getting good at it. And this is the good news, that most of us spend much of our time there. And then we either outgrow what we have been, or there's some change that happens that turns us into experiencing the release phase. So there's a disruption or a collapse, things that were working aren't. So what is changed? It's uncomfortable. Maybe we've lost our funding, or one of the main members pulls out and does something different, or you get a new member and it's a big member, and just because they're present, it changes everything you're doing. So for whatever reason, it can be a lot of different types of things, you end up in a release phase. Okay, gotta get your hands off. It's not gonna work like it used to. And then finally is the reorganization phase. And that is where it starts to happen again. The pieces come together, the new pieces that are going to fit in the new way of doing things, and then you start the cycle anew. So if you were leading a network, this is the point where you need to be thinking ahead and preparing for all of these phases. Even while you're in the growth phase, you can be sure that the conservation phase is going to be coming up. Not just discrete, 1, 2, 3, 4, but in general, you know that kind of conservation where it becomes efficient, everything starts working, is coming up. Even while things are good, you have to realize there's going to come a point at which whatever you're doing is going to need to change in response to new rules, new regulations, new members, new funding sources, anything like that is going to cause some release phase. And it won't surprise you if you know that this is going to happen. And this one always gives me hope. There's no fruit that is not bitter before it's ripe. So, as one friend likes to tell me, is everything all right? If it's not all right, it's going to be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it means it's not the end. So, healthcare industry is certainly going to give us a lot of opportunities to practice all of this. Okay, there's another chance for you to just tell me. I know that as we went through talking about those 4 phases, there were certain times in your network that you were able to move forward, even though you faced some difficult things. And I would like to give you a couple of minutes just to add your thoughts, that you've been through it. What is it that has helped you? Because we're going to change now. We've gone through what is resilience, so what difference does it make? Let's move to the now what. What kinds of things have helped you when you were going through that cycle? You're either growing, you're in the conservation phase, or you're in the collapsing phase and having to reintegrate. I'll give you a few seconds here, and then we're going to spend the rest of our time discussing strategies that you can use to build your resilience. So when maybe your network has never faced difficulties. I would doubt that. But some of the things that people have written when we've discussed this are, taking a break. Sometimes you cannot solve it on that particular day. You just have to stop. I'm going to think of something else. I'm going to take a 1 hour vacation or a 1 day vacation. Just make sure, okay, we're going to take a break. We're just going to realize we have to come back next week. So a break might be it. Humor. That certainly has helped many of us to get through a lot of difficult days, and your network too. I like to find temporary treats. It's like, okay, I'm going to just find one thing that's going well. I'm going to celebrate that. So how do we get more of what's going well? So asking some different questions. Okay. We're going to move on to the list of some strategies for building resilience. Now that we know what it is, we know what good it can do us. How do we get it? That's the million-dollar question. So, again, no magic bullets. What I tried to do was to make a list of 10 things that are some typical answers as well as some atypical approaches to resilience, and particularly for networks. So my first point is just to maintain reserves. And that might be financial, it might be physical energy, it might be social networks. Because stress is just the imbalance between what's the demand and what's the capacity. So to be able to maintain your homeostasis, you can either reduce the demands or increase the capacity. Those are the two choices that you have. So before things get too demanding, try to make sure that you have some kind of spare capacity. And I know that you can do a lot of things, you just can't do them all at once. So that's a key point to keep in mind. And the other thing is I like to use the metaphor of a mountain climber. A mountain climber, if he or she is moving up the mountain, you don't move all four extremities at once. You move a hand, then you move the other hand, and then you move one of the legs, and then you move the other legs. So if you can, try to maintain reserves and to pace things so that not everything happens at once. And that you've got not just financial reserves, but physical energy reserves and social network reserves, that people's relationships with each other are strong. When we have strong social relationships, we can forgive a lot, we can be a lot more flexible. So try to figure out some ways to build those social aspects of your network, that people actually know each other. Develop tight feedback systems and understand feedback. This has to do with maintaining, identifying, understanding who is it that gives you honest and timely and direct feedback. Do each one of you have someone in your network that gives you timely, direct, and honest feedback? Hopefully, you have at least one. If you don't, make sure that is something that you have to do to be able to nurture resilience. And when you get that feedback, whether you like what they say or not, that's the time to listen. You don't have to act on everything, but making sure that you do have feedback systems to let you know what is going on within the network. What are people pleased with? What are people having difficulty with? And that gives you a chance to address it before it gets out of control and detrimental. Third, and we touched on this before, but building social capital, and specifically strong and weak ties. Now, what do I mean by that? First of all, you want to invest in others and create a network of support, not just for you, but within your network. Because even the hardiest individual, you can't do it by yourself. And resilience has its roots in groups and communities. So strong and weak ties is a sociological principle that really essentially is that you want to keep a core group of close ties. The key people who are informal leaders, the people with resources, or members that have key roles and connections. You want to have a small core group, and yet a lot of weak ties as well. So a lot of acquaintances, a lot of people that you are aware of or that are aware of you. Those weak ties are the ones that are information carrying connections. Oh, things don't take you by surprise. You know what's out there and what's about to happen. And one last thing about social capital is that you also want to protect diversity within your group. I don't mean just outward diversity, but cognitive diversity. Thinking differently as well. And particularly, I've been in a lot of networks and work groups, and sometimes it's that outlier, the person who always goes off on the other direction. When you're having a meeting, they'll make a comment, and the subject will change abruptly. That can be irritating, and it can be your savior. I like to keep people around that will keep me from hanging myself. So sometimes your outlier, the person that is least like everyone else, make sure you're protecting that person or those thinkers as well. Maintaining modularity, strategic looseness. And this has to do with the white spaces. If you think about Goldilocks, there's a place that's just right, the sweet spot where your members are connected, but not so connected that if one goes down, you all go down. So there's some kinds of work that requires intense work together on complex material. So think about what kind of work needs to be done, and is it a time to swarm, or is it a time to break into islands? So it's the same kind of thing if you have an IT mind. It's the same characteristic that makes cloud computing possible. That sometimes when you call for it, you become very tight, and other times, depending on what is happening, you have strategic looseness. That if one succeeds, you can all succeed, but yet if one goes down, everything doesn't go down. So think about who is connected to what. Strategic redundancy. I won't say a lot about this here, but just very briefly, if you're too efficient, it can be dangerous. You don't hear that everywhere. So I'll say it one more time. If you are too efficient, it can be dangerous. For example, if you have one way of getting electricity into your hospital, and that one way goes down, you don't have enough redundancy. And you all know this because you work with it all of the time. You have backup systems, you have plan A, plan B, plan C. In my personal life, I always make sure I have redundancy in the number of house keys I have. Because if I'm running out the door and I need a set of house keys and I didn't put them back where they should have been, I know where I have my second set. And I'm not held up. I'm able to keep going. So strategic redundancy, and that also might be having more than one person with a particular kind of know-how. If you only have one person that knows how, try to create some systems so that they're able to teach the other or write it down so people have